Hello guys, welcome to another JavaScript lesson for beginners. In this lesson, we are going to build a simple quiz application, which is what you can see on the screen. The way the quiz app works is we have question and then the options. When the user selects the right option, the background color changes to green. If, however, the user selects the wrong option, the color changes to red. The ones with the white background color, those are the ones that the user haven't attempted. So for example, in which continent is Toronto? If I say North America, which is correct, the color changes to green. Of course, I can change my mind. If I select Asia, for example, the color is red because Asia is not correct. So it's actually a simple, straightforward app, but for a beginner, I believe it will make sense. Over to the code editor. This is VS Code. I have a folder and then two files inside that folder, app.js and index.html. This is all we need, all the files we need for this project. We are not going to write any CSS. The app.js is empty. This is where the whole logic for the quiz we go into. However, index.html, I've added some HTML, so we focus on the main business of the day, which is JavaScript. In the HTML, in the head section, we just have the title for this page, as well as a link to Bootstrap CSS. We are linking to Bootstrap using the CDN. You can just copy this link and paste in the head from the description of this video. Then, inside the body, we have a section that will contain everything about our quiz, including the title, like we have here. Quizy is the name, just what we have over here. Then, the quiz container div is where we are going to insert all these questions using JavaScript. The questions, the answers, everything. After that, we have another link to Bootstrap, this time the JavaScript, right? The one at the top includes the CSS. The one here, down here, includes the JavaScript for Bootstrap. So you also copy this from the description and paste inside your HTML. And finally, we have a link to app.js, which is the file we are going to work on. So that is the setup for HTML. It is actually straightforward. With that explanation, we can head over to app.js and begin to do some coding. Over to app.js, the first thing I'm going to do is to have questions to work with. This can be a question from some backend API or from some third-party API, whatever. Because we are not building some backend or API here, we are going to actually paste in some dummy questions. But for that, I will make a function. Let me call it get questions. Inside, I'm going to return an array. Inside this array is where I paste some questions we can work with. Let me quickly explain the structure of the items in the array. So this is an array of objects. Each object has question and then the options. The options are these, the options for the questions, and then the answer index. Answer index refers to which item in the option that is the correct answer. Remember, the way array works is that the first item is at index 0, the second item is at index 1, the third item index 2, in that order. So it means that for answer index 0, that the answer is cheetah for this very question. In this case, answer is at index 1. It means that 54 is the answer. Also in this case, index 1, that should be North America. And here index 3, that should be 0, 1, 2, 3, that should be 7. That is the answer. So that is the structure of question we have. Alright, so let's go on to the next thing. The next thing I want to do is to create a function for each of these items, each of these cards with the content inside it, the card for the questions. So I will actually go up. Let me call that function question element. Question element. It is going to take one of the questions. What we are going to do inside here is to make a div as a container for the question and options. So const div to be equal to document dot create element. Come on, not that. Div. This is how you can create elements in JavaScript. In this case, we created a div, HTML div. Because we are using Bootstrap for this styling, I'm actually going to add some CSS class, some class attribute to the div. For example, what we have here, we have bgdark. That is a Bootstrap CSS class name. We also have this p for text light, or that. We are going to do similar thing, but this time in JavaScript. So I will say div.classList.add. What we want to add is we are going to give this some padding. This is also Bootstrap classes, and then some margin, and finally this should be a card. So we are going to have padding around the content of the card, as well as some margins. You can see the space between them, right? And finally we make it a card. The next thing, we are going to insert the question, and we make h3 element for that case. Document dot create element. This time we create h3, and then I will say h3 dot inner text to be question dot question. Actually, that sounds a little bit confusing, so I will call this question item, and then we say question item dot question. Question item refers to one of these items. You can see we have question inside it, we have options, we have answer index as well. So when we call this function, it is going to take one of these question items. Here we are creating h3 element, and then with the inner text property, when we call inner text to the h3, this is basically setting the text that we can see here, right? So before we go further, actually, let me return this div. Before we go further, let's just have something on the screen so we see what it looks like. For that, I'm going to make another function to load what we have to the page. So I will call that load quiz. Inside here, we are going to target the HTML, this element that is going to wrap all our questions and the option. So let's call that quiz container to be equal to document dot query selector, and the ID is what we are going to use, quiz container. That is the ID. So I'll go over here and say quiz container, and then we are going to loop through all these items. We are going to loop through the questions, and for each question we call this function. Let's see that in action actually. So I'll say const questions to be equal to get questions, which refers to this function here that will give us array of questions. Then questions dot for each question Please note that this is singular question, this is plural. So they are different. And what are we going to do? We are going to say quiz container.append. Append question element. And we pass question to it. So what is going on here is that we are looping through the questions, and for each of them, for each of those question item, what we are doing is we call this function question element, passing the question item to it, which is what we have here, and that is going to create some div, create the h3 with the question text, and return the div to us. And finally, we append that div with its content to the question container, right? Now we save this, and then we head over to HTML. After the line where we have imported the app.js, after the line, not before it, we can come down here and make another script. Inside this script, we just call that function get, actually it is load quiz. We can call that function because we have already imported it at this line. Now I will open this index.html in the browser. That is what I have here. If I refresh the page, nothing happens. Let me check in a moment. So actually, let me open the console. This is one of the ways you can quickly check what is wrong. If I go to console, if you inspect, you go to console. Let me zoom in a little bit. So it says that it cannot read property of null, reading append, blah blah. This is actually referring to the part where we targeted the container using query selector. We're supposed to have the pound symbol there, right? Because it is an ID. This is how we target it. I will refresh the page. Okay, I will close this. So we have the items, but it's looking weird with just white background. Let me see why. Okay, I made yet another mistake. So the reason we are having that is, if you look down here, we actually created the question, but we did not insert that to the div that we return. So what we are supposed to do is div.append. We append the h3. That is what we're supposed to do. This is how we append it to the div before we return it. So refresh, we have the questions. Good. Let's work on the option next. For that, I'm going to make a simple function. Let's call that option element. This will take one of the options. Inside here, I'm going to make a div document.create element div. We're going to do something a little bit different. You can see the way we inserted an HTML here. Similar to what we have here, we call div, we append the h3 element. There are other ways you can actually append or insert HTML into another HTML. In that case, we are going to use insert adjacent HTML. This is another way we can do it. The first thing it takes is the position where you are going to insert this. There are 4 options. We are going to use after begin. And then we are going to use backticks, not single quote, take note, backticks, to insert HTML as text, in form of text, right? We are not going to do create the element and then insert it. This allows us to just type something like and type paragraph, close your paragraph, that kind of thing. Please note that these are in lowercase. It's not in camel case, the after begin, and these are backticks. One more time. Inside the backticks, let me actually format this a little bit. I want to have a label. This label will hold both the text and the radio button. Close that label down here. Up on. And then inside here, let's have an input for the radio. Type to be equal to radio and name to be equal to. For the name, let me close this first. For the name, remember the way the radio button works. Each radio button in the same group will have the same name, right? So if I quickly go over to here, the radio button for each, all these radio buttons for each of the questions, we have the same name at the same value for the name attribute. That way, when you check one, the other ones are unchecked. If the value for the name attribute, if they're not the same, they're not going to behave as one whole set of radio buttons. So they have to have the same name. Let me adjust this. For that name, we are going to say question. Let me just say question underscore. Put something here. Question index. So this is going to say something like, we're actually going to bring in the question index. Come on. Question index. When we call this function, we are going to pass both option and question index. The question index is 0 for the first item, 1, 2, we get the point, right? This is going to say question underscore 0 for the very first one. That means all the items, we have it. For the next item, it's going to be question underscore 1 for all the items. And finally, inside here, let's have the option. Save that. Come on, trying to format. And we return the div. Return div. Okay. Now we go over to question element. What we are going to do is, for now, let's just display those options. Remember that for each question item, we have the options for each of them. So what I'm going to do is take this question item dot options dot for each option arrow function. So we are looking through the options for each of the question item, and we just call that function we have down there the option element. Let's say option item to be equal to option element. We pass option, not that, option. This also expects us to pass the question index. So what we are going to do is we actually modify this one a little bit to have question index. It means that when we call this function, the question element, we're supposed to pass the index of the current question. That is the index of this. And thankfully, for each gives us the index as the second argument. So we can get the index like so, and then we pass it to the function call here, which is equivalent to what we have here. And finally, we can pass that down to question element call. Now we say div.append option item. Save. Let's quickly see that first. Refresh this page. You can see we have the options, and when you select one, the other ones deselect because they have the same value for the name attributes, which is what we tried to do down here with the combination of this text and question index. The next thing we are going to do is to show the appropriate background color when the user clicks to select an option. So we are going to target these labels, the label. That is actually one of the reasons we are using the label, to wrap both the radio and the text, so that when the user clicks, whether it is the text or the radio button, we should be able to target that, right? What I'm going to do is go over to here, before we append that option item, we are actually going to target this label to listen to click on it. So we can say const answer text label to be equal to option item dot query selector. Please take note, we are saying option item, not document dot query selector, because this gives us HTML element, this function call. We can actually still call all this method for HTML elements on it. That is why we are able to say query selector on the element. What are we looking for? We are looking for element label, right? Option selector label. Then we say options, not options, sorry, answer text dot add event listener click, and we have a function. Inside this function will be called whenever that label is clicked. Inside here, we basically want to do, we check if the selected option is the correct one, right? So how can we do that? You can say, to actually do that, we need to bring in one more thing, option index. Just similar to what we did up there when we used for each. It gives you the index, the position of the current item, right? Similar to here, this gives the position of this option. With that, all we have to do is option index. If option index is equal to question item dot, what did we call that? Just a moment, answer index, correct? Dot answer index if they are equal. So this is checking the position of the option. For example, if this is the position, theta, and then if the answer index is exactly the same position, in this case theta as well, both of them are 0, right? Because this takes option index 0, index 1, we have gone through that before. What we are going to do is to target the div, the card, the entire card, and change the background color. So we can say div dot class list dot add bg primary. This comes from Bootstrap, and we make the text white as well. Text white. Actually, it is text light, not white. Otherwise, that means the person selected the wrong option. We can say div dot class list dot add bg danger, and text light as well. This will give us the green background color. This will give us the red background color. We save, refresh this page. Let's try that out. Red, okay. The problem is, because it was initially red, we have to actually remove that. Let me show you in a moment. Div dot class list dot remove bg danger. I will actually move this up here. So let me finish down here before I explain that. bg primary. So what is happening is, for example, I selected the wrong answer initially, so the background color was red, but when I selected the correct one, it did not change because it still has that background color red. So what is going to happen is, when the person eventually selects the correct option, we remove the red background and add the green background. If, however, the person gets the answer, the option wrong, we remove the green background and add the red background. So I'll just try this one more time. Success. The background is success, not primary, please. Success, that is green. Refresh, we get the green, we get red. It now works as expected, right? Okay guys, so far so good. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so to help the channel grow and so that other people can have access to this kind of content. I so much appreciate when you hit that like button, and please subscribe. Thank you. So as a recap, let's just quickly see what has been going on here so far. We started by making these questions. Like I said, this can come from anywhere, whether it is some third-party API or whatever. And then we make an element to create each of these card items with the content inside it. It has a div, it has the h3 element for the question. Here we append that h3 element. But each of the question item has options. So we say question item.options. For each of the option, we call this function that gives us another element for the option with the content, the radio button, and the text. We call that function, we get that option item, which is an element. Because it is an HTML element, we can go ahead and call query selector or similar functions on it, or method on it, right? So take note that this is option.querySelector. For the label wraps both the radio button and the text, and we target click on it. So that is why we are saying the answer text label.add event listener click. Whenever it is clicked, we check the option index, which we get from the for each call here, and we compare that with the answer index, which we get from here. If the index is matched, so if the index is 0 and the answer index is 0, we get a green background by adding this bootstrap class to the div, the entire div. If, however, the person selects a wrong answer, we add the danger background. And at each time, we make sure to remove the incorrect background, assuming it has been previously added, right? So guys, we have our quiz app. Please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so. I really appreciate when you do that. Until next time, happy coding.